refresher of filing a schedule of occupancy in DOB Now in regards to BIS jobs. We've had training on this back in February before we launched this in March 1, but we've all learned a few things, both on the DOB side and the customer side. So we've put together a short presentation. It's only about 12 or so slides where we're going to go through a bunch of different scenarios of real-world cases that are out there in terms of buildings and various types of occupancy and what states they are in the construction life cycle, and how to complete the schedule of occupancy in DOB Now for those situations. So let us go through the dozen or so slides. It'll take about 45 minutes, maybe a little bit less, and then we will open it up to questions. We've kept the audience fairly small. We're doing 4 of these sessions. This is the second one. We've kept the audience fairly small, so we'll be able to go through and unmute your lines one at a time. You can use the raise hand function in the WebEx when we get to that portion. So again, just listen for the first 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have plenty of time to answer questions. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Borough Commissioner Scott Pavon. Scott, I think you need to unmute yourself.
You know, I think I'm going to market a T-shirt that we can all wear that says, "Sorry, I was on mute." If that ain't a telltale sign of the whole year. Thanks for joining, everybody. For those folks on the call who we may have already coordinated with a little bit since the March 1 launch, good to hear you, and thanks for joining. And for those folks we haven't yet coordinated with, thanks for joining. The goal of this presentation today is to effectively give you some rules of thumb. So when you're preparing the submission into the DOB Now build system of your schedule of occupancy information in order to get a TCO or a CO out of the DOB Now build system. That's the focus of today, is those transfers. I need my TCO, I need my CO on my BIS application, and what's my first step? So today is about getting that first step right. And for most folks on the call, I know you've already been doing it for the last couple of months now, and we've certainly seen a lot of volume of them, as is expected. We've learned a lot along the way, both on your side and on our side. And so what we wanted to present today was some basic underlying rules of thumb. Mark, if I'm not mistaken, we're sharing this presentation material with attendees as well. Is that correct?
Yes, if it isn't already up, it will be up today on the website, the same place where everybody joined. They can find a copy of this presentation.
Wonderful. And I think the goal of this, these 12 slides is to, for those of you who prepare these or have staff in your companies who prepare them and submit them, is to give you the underlying rules and principles. Let's go ahead, Colin. I don't know who's driving on the slides. So let's get started. Let's keep going. That was sort of what I already said. Okay. What this basically is a diagram that I think most people have seen already. You have an approved BIS Schedule A in the BIS system, and you want to get that TCO or that CO. And since launch on March 1st, you need to get that CO or TCO out of the DOB Now system. And when you think, especially for new buildings and in many cases for Alt1s as well, DOB Now doesn't know anything about your building because your filings are in BIS. BIS is the database of record for your application. And what BIS knows about your building is all kinds of information, but one of the things it knows is your BIS Schedule A, what was approved. And so in order to get that CO now, you're going to have to introduce to the DOB Now system the information associated with your approved BIS filing. And I think for folks in the beginning, it seemed simple. All I had to do was move my Schedule A and BIS information into DOB Now build. And that's partially right. But the second point of this is also recognizing that depending on where a project is in its lifeline, whether it's already gotten some occupancy or if it hasn't, that affects and changes how you prepare this document. Because what you're submitting from that BIS job is information that populates a new function in DOB Now that BIS never had. It's called the Building Schedule of Occupancy. And the Building Schedule of Occupancy is not the same thing as a BIS Schedule A. BIS Schedule A is a static document. It's a piece of paper, effectively, with a bunch of words on it, some of them spelt wrong half the time. But what the DOB Now system is designed to do is to take information from an approved application and make much more reliable data, and to provide it at a transparent level, the Building Schedule of Occupancy, the overall building. And it ties it together and coordinates it if you have more than one project that's affecting the certificate of occupancy. So think of the Building Schedule of Occupancy as a scoreboard. It's a status indicator. So it's not just a Sched A. It's more than that. So depending on the status of inspections or of occupancy, et cetera, the information on that Building Schedule of Occupancy is going to be a little different. And so when you're moving that BIS job in, you're going to have to be cognizant of that. For new filings in DOB Now, like new buildings and alt COs, it's a lot more automatic. And I think every one of our customers will learn to enjoy the function that it provides because it is very automatic. For BIS filings, you and our team have to get that information into the system in the way that it needs it. Let's go to the next slide, Colin. So this slide is effectively the basic rules. You can take these same rules and bullet them out in, a matter of a paragraph as well. But on the left side, you see what your role is as industry professionals. And the key things to recognize, you'll see next to the two industry professionals, right? You'll see the role you play and the role that we play in populating this information into the build system. So if we start at the top, right, that is, when do you enter existing? And what do our examiners do when you enter existing? And at the bottom is when you enter proposed, and what our examiners do when you enter proposed. So let's start at the top. When do you enter existing? Now, let's keep in mind one other thing. These rules apply to each row that you populate, just like when you filled out each row of a BIS Schedule A. So you apply these rules for each row. And you'll understand as we go a little further into the presentation why you want to keep that in your head, that you apply these rules for each row. And each row represents an occupancy on a floor, right? So if you have more than one occupancy on a floor, you have more than one row on a floor. So let's get started. When do you enter existing information? When the space is inspected and established on records. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's on a CO or a TCO. Now, in some cases, there is no CO or TCO. It's established by other records. Keep that under your hat for a second. So when do you enter existing for a floor use? When it's on a TCO or a CO. And what does our DOB team do? Well, they check to confirm you're right. There it is on that CO or TCO. And they say that the occupancy that you say exists in this building, on that floor, on that row, is verified. It's there. It exists. It's got a CO or a TCO. That should be pretty clear. Now, if it never had a CO or a TCO, but the department accepts it, that's unverified. I'm going to leave that under the hat for a while. The record has both existing and proposed entered. What does that mean? Well, that means that I'm doing work on that floor. And there was an existing CO occupancy on that floor, and I filed an alteration to change it in some way, shape, or form. And I haven't yet got occupancy for that work that I'm doing. So the plan examiner will mark it as active because you haven't got it yet. So you have existing and proposed. Now, when do you enter proposed? At the bottom, when the space is being constructed or altered, and you haven't yet had it inspected and occupied. You have to remember, you always enter what's proposed using 2014 occupancies, right? Because the Department of Buildings has to issue a single certificate, either TCO or CO for a building. And those certificates have to all use today's occupancy classification. What does the BIS plan examiner, or what does the DOB plan examiner do? They confirm that the scope is included, and they mark it as active. I think most folks on the call sort of get that. But when do I call something existing and when do I call something proposed is a little different for this BSO. So if I have a new building, my BIS Sched A always just says proposed, doesn't it? Well, that's BIS. But if you got a TCO for those floors, and it's out there on the public record, it could be a TCO of any kind, even core and shell. That means that that proposed use was on your BIS Schedule A, now exists. That's a big leap, and that's the change for all of us. Not just you guys, but us too. Because the BIS Sched A for an NB has always just said proposed, right? But you got a TCO for it already, and I need another TCO. So that occupancy is now existing. That's the key leap. Let's go to the next slide, Colin. Oh, gosh. So the top of the slide talks about the rules for populating, again, that schedule of occupancy for an NB. And the bottom of the slide talks about the rules if it's an Alt1. And again, remember, these rules apply at each one of those rows that you're entering. So this is kind of a yes-no game, right? And so you follow A, B, C, D, and E along the top. You see all those questions. And how you answer those questions is how you proceed forward, right? So if it's an NB, let's start with A, core and shell or some other TCO issued in BIS. If no, right? So you just answer those questions. If yes, just keep that under your hat. Let's go to the next question. Should I enter anything in existing information? Well, let's go back to the first point. If there's no TCO issued yet, then no, because this is a new building. It's all proposed. There is no existing, right? And I haven't got a TCO yet, so it's still proposed. But let's look at row number 2, where the green check mark is. A said, yes, I got a TCO for that floor use already, even though it's a new building. So should I enter it as existing? Yep, because it was inspected and it was issued. John Rain gave me a TCO, so it exists now. That's the big leap. What code year designation should I use? 2014, of course, because I want my TCO for that use, and I want it today, so it's 2014. Should I enter anything in proposed information? That's an excellent question. The answer at the bottom for 2 is obvious, no, because I'm not proposing anything. I already have an existing use for my NB on my TCO, and I'm not proposing any change to it. It's already occupied, so I don't enter anything in proposed. But look at row 1. Do I enter anything in proposed? Yes, of course I do. Why? Because it's an NB and I haven't got a TCO yet, so it's still proposed. Got it? See, it all makes sense. And let's go to the last question. What code year designation should I use? 2014, of course, right? Now, if you look at it on the Alt1, it gets a little more complicated. I'm sure you guys all understand why it gets a little more complicated, because the building may already have a CO from 1973 or something like that, and I'm doing an alteration to that building. So let's go through those questions. Undergoing a change of use. Am I changing something on that row? If I'm not, right? Or yes, or yes. Let's keep going. Change of use authorized on a TCO issued prior to March 1st. So my Alt1 was filed, and I already got a TCO for that change from that old CO. So no, or row 3, yes, I already got my TCO on my Alt1. Let's keep going. Should I enter anything in existing information? Yes. Question is what? Should I enter anything in yes? I should enter things in yes. What code year designation should I use? 2014, even if I'm not doing work on the floor. Why? Well, the old CO said J2. And I'm doing some work on some other floors. I'm not doing work on that floor. But you know that the department can't issue a CO today that says J2. We have to issue it that says R2. But I'm not doing any work on that floor. That's right. But we still have to issue a CO with the equivalent occupancies. So if you had J2 on your old 1973 CO, we're going to issue it today, even though you didn't do any work there, saying R2. I think we all know that, but it's hard to remember it. E, should I enter anything in proposed information? So let's look at row 2 on that one. Let's go back to question B. I didn't get a TCO yet. Yes, I should enter proposed because there's work going on that floor use. So I'm not working on floor 7, but I am working on floor 5. So, and I haven't got a TCO for it yet. So I have to put proposed in. And what code should I enter? 2014. So let's go to the next slide, but that's a really, really valuable tool that you guys and your team can use when you're looking at it and making sure you're checking your work before you hit that submit button, because it'll speed the process through so that our guys, if you throw a good pitch, our guys can call it a strike, right? And our guys are learning it as we go along too. So let's not forget, we're trying to ensure that you guys throw a good pitch so that we can call it a strike and move forward. Okay, now, this is sort of like a table of contents for the next slides, because the next few slides are a series of examples. And when I talk about examples, let's remember, we're talking about at that individual row, right? And so now we're going to take those rules, which are fairly high level, and we're now going to apply them to specific situations at a floor use level at a particular row. And this is like a table of contents of the next slides you're going to see. So we have 4 examples for NBs, NB 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have 6 examples for, well, actually 7, but we have 6 examples for Alt1s where the building already had a CO, and your Alt1 is doing work in that building that already had a CO. And the last scenario where the Alt1 is filed on a building that never had a CO because it's like a pre-38, right? Never had a CO, never needed one, but I'm doing Alt1 either in all or portions of the building, and I got to deal with it. So let's go to the first slide. This is NB 1 and 2. No occupancy was previously issued in BIS. So remember those rules we talked about? This is a new building, right? So your BIS Get A only says proposed, right? And I never got a TCO for this floor use yet, right? So it's effectively a permitted construction site. Maybe I'm getting inspections and doing all that stuff, right? But it doesn't exist yet. It's still proposed, right? So let's look at it. Proposed occupancy to the space, it's B occupancy 2014, right? So I'm over on the left side, the blue columns, right? Current BIS application status, it's permit issued. I don't have a TCO, right? So what's my BIS Schedule A say? Well, that's like we said, it's a new building in BIS. My BIS Get A always just says proposed, right? We've been doing that for 30 years, right? So let's go to the green columns. The green columns are, what do I enter in DOB now? Well, it's a new building. My biz Sched A says proposed. I don't have any TCO yet, so guess what? Same. It's proposed. Why? Because nothing exists yet. Hasn't been inspected yet. Still under construction. That makes nice sense, right? And so now we look over at when the occupancy is authorized, right? It's a B occupancy, right? It includes the biz job number, right? And there is no occupancy yet, right? Because it hasn't been issued yet, right? Let's go to the next one. The next one could be exactly the same scenario, except you already got a core and shell TCO for the building. So let's go through that same row, right? It's a business occupancy, right? The permit was issued, and I got my core and shell TCO before the DOB Now launch in March 1st, right? What's my BIS Sched A say? Well, what it's always said for 30 years, proposed. What do you enter in the system for your BSO request? Existing. Why? Because it got occupancy. I know core and shell, there's still work going on. I got it. But just stay at that high level, right? It got occupancy. So what's on your approved BIS Sched A is proposed is now existing because it got it. And when you file all those wonderful new NBs and Alt COs and DOB Now, this stuff's going to be automatic. But for those BIS transfers, you and our guys are the automatic function. So let's get that right. That's a really, really important change. If you look at the green columns from NB1 and the green columns from NB2, significant change. If your teams get that right, you guys won't need a full count on your pitch. And so if you look over on the yellows, that's the TCO that's already been issued, right? Business, there's a biz TCO that was issued, and it was core and shell. Next page, Colin. Next slide, guys. Oh, there you go. So now, still with the NBs. So scenario 3, scenario 4, right? So let's read what scenario 3 is because I can't remember what these slides say. Core and shell was issued in biz, and a PAA was filed in biz after the core and shell was issued. Okay, so let's make sure we understand what that scenario is, and we get that by reading the blue columns. So it's a B occupancy for this row, right? And then the permit was issued and the core and shell was issued prior to March 1st, right? And you got an approved PAA. Well, that could be after March 1st. Doesn't really matter. You got an approved PAA that changed your Schedule A and biz. That's different than the core and shell TCO you have today. You either changed occupancy, you changed your occupant load, let's say, right? Oh, I upped my occupant load or something. I did a horizontal exit or something, right? So I upped my occupant load on my approved BIS Sched A. My core and shell TCO prior to March 1st said 100 people on the floor, and my PAA approved BIS Sched A for that same row says 150. Okay, so now you got to update the BSO. Why? Because it ain't automatic for a biz job, so you got to do it. Okay. So what do you enter in the green columns? You enter B occupancy 2014 code. I'm not sure why we're telling you have to enter core and shell, but I think the occupancy type you have to enter is that the thing already got a TCO. Now don't forget, DOB Now doesn't know anything about your building because it's all in biz, including the TCO that was issued. So you're the communication medium, your guys and our guys, right? So we have to be straight and clear on this. So it exists. Yeah? How does it exist? Oh, it has a TCO. What kind? Core and shell. That's what those green columns say, right? And I'm never quite sure what the, and there's our change. Pardon me. There's our change. There's our change. Okay, I'm waking up now. See the change, existing and proposed in the green? Sorry, I made up the wrong PAA. You went from business to mercantile. That's your approved BIS PAA on Sched A. You went from business to mercantile, right? Now the scenario makes sense. So you have a B occupancy as existing because there's a core and shell TCO for the existing, and I got an approved PAA on my BIS Sched A to change that to mercantile. So what am I entering? Existing, because I have TCO, core and shell business. Proposed, mercantile. And then you can proceed with your TCO request. Got it? So that you can get that mercantile on the next TCO. Sorry, that took me a while to wake up on that one. And before, TCO was issued in BIS. So let's read again, see if we can get it all right. Proposed occupancy in the blue columns, B, permit issued with TCO issued prior to March 1st. By BIS Schedule A, it's an NB, so of course it says proposed. My DOB now entry, when I submit it, I already got a TCO. I put it in as existing. That one sounds an awful lot like NB2 on the previous slide, but that one seems relatively clear. The first one here is key. You see that PAA scope happening. So because there's PAA scope on something you already had a TCO on, existing and proposed, right? Let's go to the next slide, Colin. I think we hit the Alt1s now. I want to stay on time here. So let's look at our first Alt1 scenario. An Alt1 with enlargement. Oh, God, you guys, we start with the complicated one. Okay. An Alt1 with enlargement is filed in BIS for a new floor. I'm adding a new floor. It was a 4-story to a 5-story, let's say. And I haven't got a TCO yet. No occupancy issued on the given job. So let's look at the blue columns, make sure we understand the scope, right? Original legal occupancy of the space, of the floor, of the row, Well, this is my enlargement floor. It was an existing 4-story, now it's 5. Was there an original legal occupancy? Nope, there was no 5. Proposed change to the occupancy of the space. I don't know why we're using the word change there. It's R1. Sounds like it's a hotel or something, right? Current BIS application status. That's permanent tire, but no TCO issued, right? So I think we know where this is going to go. My BIS Sched A existing is blank. Why? Because it's enlargement floor. There was no existing on it, right, for that floor. Proposed is R1, right? Did I get a TCO? Nope. So let's look at the green columns. Is there anything existing on floor 5? Nope. It's under construction. What's my proposed? R1 2014 code, right? Doesn't matter what job you, or what code you filed it under. I want a CO, so 2014 equivalent is what you give us, right? Let's go to Alt1 scenario 2. An Alt1 with enlargement. So again, our enlargement floor is filed in BIS for a new floor. Same scenario, 4-story going to 5. And you got your TCO. Blue columns, understand the scope. Original legal occupancy, none. It's an enlargement floor. Proposed is R1. Current BIS status, I got my permit and I got my TCO prior to March 1st, right? What's my BIS Sched A say? Existing, nada. Proposed, of course. What's my DOB now schedule of occupancy say? It got a TCO, right? 5th floor. Is there anything proposed? Nope. I got my TCO, so it goes in existing, right? And you can see how that all plays out on the right side. Next slide, Colin. Scenario 3 at the top. Oh boy, this one has different colors. Okay. An Alt1 job is filed in BIS to change the use for a portion of the building, meaning it was an existing floor, not an enlargement floor. No occupancy has been issued for that Alt1 in BIS. Okay, so change of use on an existing floor. Let's read the blue columns, make sure I got it right. Original legal occupancy of the space, it's 68 code CO, so our old friend J2. You know, when I moved to New York, the first time I looked at the 68 code, I said, what the hell's J occupancy? Never knew what that. Anyway, it makes sense to me now, but didn't then. Proposed change of occupancy, I'm changing it to a hotel, right? And I'm using 2014 code, right? Current BIS application, I got my permit entire, but I do not have a TCO yet. These are existing floors. I'm changing the use and occupancy on it. What's my BIS Sched A say? Existing's J2, proposed is R1. Easy peasy, right? Because we've been doing that for 30 years. Green columns, existing. Well, you get to say what the existing is. You get to say it was J2 68 code, right? because DOB now doesn't know anything about this building. Don't forget, this building has lived its entire life in biz, and you have the illustrious role of introducing this existing building to the DOB Now system, and thank you very much. So you're telling it, yeah, that floor it has existing CO, it's J2, old code, 68 code, right? What am I doing? Oh, I'm working on this floor, and I'm changing it to R1, and I'm using 2014 because I want a CO that for today, right, for my change of use. Okay, so that all seems relatively clear, right? But there's an interesting scenario there, right? You're having to record, you're having to tell DOB now what that existing occupancy is, even though you're changing it. Let's go to scenario 4. An Alt1 job is filed to change the use for a portion of the building, and you did get your TCO. Same scenario. Existing J2, let's go blue columns. Existing J2, 68 code. I'm going to R1, 214. I got permit entire, but I also got my TCO. Okay, what's your BIS Get A say? Well, J2 to R1, that's fine. What do you enter in the system? We don't need ancient history. Why? Because you're trying to get a CO for the thing now, right? So we don't really need that ancient history. So you just give us the existing, because I already got my TCO. Somebody needs no ancient history? Go back to biz and look, right? I already got my TCO. Here it is. It's R1. That's the existing occupancy. There's the TCO. Okay, next slide, Colin. Okay, scenario 5. An Alt1 job is filed in biz. Let's read this. We got orange. Sorry, that's my phone. An Alt1 job is filed in biz with no change of use for a portion of the building. Okay. So your Alt1's filed, and you're doing work on floors 1 through 5, but you're not doing work on floors 6 through 10. Got it? I think what this one is talking about is, what do you do with those floors where I'm not working? Got it? That's a big one. Your team needs to know that. Our team needs to know that too, right? We know what we do in biz, but what do we do with this crazy thing? Okay, it's not a crazy thing. It's a beautiful thing. For a portion of the building, no occupancy has been issued for the Alt1 in biz, right? So what we're talking about here are the floors where I'm not working. Okay, so let's go to those blue columns to make sure we understand the scope. Original legal occupancy, J268. Proposed, I'm not changing that. I'm not touching it. We know what we do in biz, right? Existing, no change, right? Right. Current biz application, I got my permit, but I ain't got a TCO yet. Okay, what's my biz Get A say? This is important. You guys have been doing this since 2008. You've been telling us this is a floor I'm not working on. I'm not touching it. The existing CO is J2 because it's 68 code, but yeah, I need a new CO, so I'm updating the construction code classifications to today's codes, even though I'm not working on the floor. You guys have been doing that since 2008. That's not new, what you see in those gray columns there. That's not new, right? And that's what your BIS Get A says today. Remember that column that says yes, no for the occupancies and the blah, blah, blah. That's the job you guys have been doing since 2008. Nobody wanted to do that in 2008, but everybody does a marvelous job of it now. Let's look at the green columns. What do I enter? No TCO has been issued on this job. And this is a floor that I'm not working on. All I'm doing is I'm introducing it to DOB Now, because DOB Now does not know it's a 10-story building. I'm telling it that. I'm only working on 5 of the floors. And this floor I'm not working on, right? So, but I want a CO for the building. So I have to give DOB Now what it needs. So it's existing. I'm not doing any work there. Is it J2? No, it's R2 because I have to do my job. I have to update the occupancy classification, right? Just like you did in biz, right? But it's existing. Is there anything proposed on this floor? Nope, not touching it. I'm not touching it. So I'm not entering proposed. Got it? It's an R2. So now in the yellow column, right, what kind of occupancy does it have on this floor? It's R2. It's got a 68 code CO, and its status for that floor is final. And I'm not touching it. Yes, there's an Alt1 in the building, but I'm not touching this floor. Let's go to scenario 6. This is probably the same thing, but a TCO did get issued. Do you see any change? I don't. Why? Because you're not touching this floor. You're not working on this floor. So if you compare what you entered for scenario 5 above and scenario 6 below, it's the same. Why? Because I am not working on this floor. So if a TCO was issued on my Alt1, this is a floor that I'm not working on, so the rules remain the same. That's actually really interesting. That's a nice slide, Colin. Next one. Oh, God. Okay, this is the one on the pre-38, right? Let's see what it says. So the thing never had a CO. Let's see what it says. No prior occupancy, pre-38 building was issued in BIS on the space, right? So again, we're just talking about a row. Don't forget this, right? And no TCO was issued on whatever job you filed. And I don't know if this row has work on it or not, Colin. I think this one does have work on it, right? I don't know if it does or it doesn't, but let's see. Okay. Original legal occupancy of the space. Well, that's kind of a misnomer. It's legally there, right? But you don't have a CO for it, so you can't really put anything in there. But wait, we haven't got to the BIS columns yet. I'm just talking about the scope here, the blue columns. We'll get to the BIS columns. They'll make sense, right? Proposed change of occupancy to the space. No change of use. I'm not touching this space, right? So this is a pre-38 building, and I'm doing an Alt1, and I'm not touching this space. I assume that's what that means. And my current BIS application status, I don't have a TCO for it yet, right? What's my BIS Sched A say? Because you guys have been doing this for a long time. The existing, because it was pre-38, you're probably using old code classifications, right? As residential, proposed as R2, because that's just what BIS says, even though I'm not doing any work. But I had to put it on the Sched A with today's occupancy classifications. Let's look at the green, right? So old code occupancy, whatever it was res existing, right? Proposed is R2. Let's say I am doing work on the floor, right? But I didn't get a TCO, right? So, either way, you're giving us the 2014, right? So there probably could have been another scenario, AI number 8, depending on if you're doing work or not on the floor. But I think that's where we stopped, right, Colin? What's the next slide? Oh gosh. Important considerations. I've memorized this. Let's read them together. Applicants shall not record a floor level restrictions. Aha! Okay. Boy, yeah, I should have had Marty for this one. So look, these are some key things that happen during the TCO request process, right? But don't forget what this presentation is about. This is about making sure that that transfer from your approved BIS into the DOB Now so that I can create a building schedule of occupancy in DOB Now. I can introduce my building to DOB Now, right? What you should remember that you don't have to do, because a lot of the things you're looking at on this slide are things that happen in the next step in the process. Because don't forget, this step that we've been talking about is all new, right, for those BIS jobs, right? It's automatic for your DOB Now filed new buildings and alt COs, but it ain't automatic for BIS jobs, right? So, but this is something to remember, that these things that we're about to look at, 1, 2, 3, 4, typically happen, right, or some key things to remember about actually when I make my request for my TCO, right? So applicants, number 1, applicants shall not record floor level restrictions except on the JSO for existing and proposed spaces, right? So think about that, right? So sometimes the most common one you can think of, say it's a residential building, it got a TCO already, right? And I got all my floors minus the hoist run dwelling units, right? That's a common scenario, especially for folks on this call, right? That's like an exception or a restriction, right? You don't have to worry about entering those. Now, why is that important for you to remember? It's important for you to remember that the way DOB Now is set up is it's an improvement on something that's always been not so great in the BIS system. When you want a TCO for something less than what your approved BIS Sched A says, the only way to do it in the BIS world is you had to go back and muck up your beautiful Biz Sched A. You had to go back and muck it up, right? Because you had to put in there minus the hoistway unit and this, that, and the other thing and make a mess of the thing, right? And that's just a strange procedure that all of us on this call, on your side and on our side, got used to over the last million years. And the DOB Now process cleans that up. The goal of the DOB Now process is that when you get your Sched A, and I'll use the DOB Now term for it, JSO approved in DOB Now, it stays clean. It stays an application record. It doesn't have to change just because I have an exception or a restriction on the TCO that gets issued. So what we've done is we've uncoupled the beauty of a beautiful, well-crafted NB-approved Sched A, JSO, Job Schedule of Occupancy, to the certificate, the TCO with restrictions and stuff and blah, 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 that gets issued, right, along the way. So what it says in gray is that the DOB Now, the DOB Project Advocate will add that information when they review your CO requests, right? They'll add it because they're having to go back and look at the inspection sign-offs that are there. And we know that the inspection team put in the temp construction minus the hoistway. So it's the project advocates and the DBC staff that are adding that to make sure. So you don't have to add it when you enter it into the BSO, right, from the BIS, right? The borough comments that get populated only that get populated onto the CO are entered by DOB Now, or by DOB only, right? Borough comments are not CO comments. Borough comments are on the front page of the Certificate of Occupancy. And the borough comments are there for if John and Lisa in Manhattan or Derek and Simon in Queens are expected to put some specific restrictions. Say you have an inflated structure or something and it's only good for 10 years, or a BSA variance requires a note to be added or something, right? That's where Derek or John or Lisa or Simon might add that, right? So you've never needed to put anything in borough comments. CO comments, that's the CO comments at the bottom of the Sched A that for years, all of us have been littering with whatever we want to put on there. We're asking you guys to follow some restraints, right? But you add those, right? And you bring them over, right? Because your BIS Sched A had them. You put them on the paper Sched A that got data entered into BIS, right? And now it's your job to put them into the BSO as well, right? Don't add new CO comments that are not on your approved Sched A. That's a fundamental rule, right? Don't add stuff, right? Because the technical review of compliance for these jobs remains in BIS. And the last thing you or I want is that you try and make a technical compliance change to your job scope through this process. Please don't do that. Even if it's a pro-cert job, please don't do that. If it was approved in BIS, just diligently bring it over the way it was approved in BIS, all right? And the JSO number 4, the JSO for the transfer, oh God, of the Sched A information in DOB Now only, right? If the existing BIS Sched A is flawed, it must be corrected with a PAA in BIS prior to populating it. That's part of the same thing I said on 3, right? Don't try and fix something as part of this process. Why? It's a BIS job. And it'll be a BIS job for the rest of its life. It's a BIS job. Where do you fix a BIS job? Where do you fix an error on a BIS job? You file a PAA in BIS. If your Sched A needs a fix and you know it, don't do your BSO yet. Do a PAA in BIS, get it approved, then come and do it. That's what that item's about. Next slide. Oh, God. That's it. Thank goodness I talked too much. Mark, I'm going to let you and Diego handle how you guys want to do questions. Who else do I have with me? Oh, thank God I got D. Damien's here. Do we have Lena on the call?
Yes, we do. So, folks, we have a number of people, in addition to Scott, who can answer some of the questions that you have. So we're going to use the raise your hand feature in WebEx. Click on your name, right click, and do raise